Hello, and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Doof Network, where we dive deep into Wildbow's most nice and accurate work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
Yes, and we are back to talk about Mala Fide 10.2. So Blake is full on in other mode and is looking for friends, and the friend he's looking for is Mags. So of course he goes to school, but the school is very heavily fortified, so he is forced to just kind of wait outside.
Well, yeah, but it's Blake, so he doesn't just wait outside, he doesn't just camp out, he decides to go exploring in the meantime, because he cannot sit still.
Well, he sits still for a while, and then kind of starts to see all the weird shit that's going on. There aren't just runes like he initially thought, there's 4 others camped around the school, just keeping an eye out.
Yeah. I mean, it's as he said, heavily fortified.
Yeah. And it's, so, this is kind of a thread that runs through this chapter, is what exactly the current state of the war is. Because it seems pretty cold, a cold war. Things have not yet kicked off. But it's interesting, the Duchamps/Behames are clearly worried that their children are in danger. Or is that's what it seems at this point. Later on, potentially, the idea that the children are the danger is raised.
Yeah, I mean, a Cold War is sort of the perfect description for where we're at right now. Everyone is gathering arms and just sort of doing passive shows of force, but we're really all just standing around waiting for the shoe to drop and the shit to hit the fan in a very big way. And there's this real, through at least for all the Behames and Duchamps, there's this real fakeness to how okay they're sort of acting. They're still sending their kids to school. And it's just I don't know, it seems really disingenuous and kind of weird to me that they're all just nothing's going on. Look, we're all just being totally normal. It's all fine. Yeah, and it's clearly not fine.
I wonder if that's a kind of drawback to being a Duchamp or a Behame where you're leading a civilian life as well. You kind of have to pretend that things are okay sometimes. Obviously, Johannes doesn't have that problem, which presumably is an advantage. He also doesn't have anyone kind of tying him down in the way that the Behames and Duchamps have their children that they need to kind of protect.
Yes, of course, on the other hand, there's strength in numbers. I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to this contest is Johannes represents a single point of failure for his entire cause.
Yes.
Whereas that's not necessarily as true of the Duchamp and Behames. We've seen people like Duncan can just step straight into the fold.
I think it is still true to an extent, though. I mean, I can't... Sandra's the one who's rallied all the Behames here. I think it would very much weaken their position, if not just have them back down completely, losing
potentially.
Sandra. Yeah.
That's fair.
Anyway, as Blake is kind of wandering around the school, he notices a woman that looks like she's straight out of the Trailer for Cats, and also the faceless woman who he's seen before, and they kind of have this very weird game of chicken where they're walking towards each other, seemingly going to fight, but this is prevented by another guy, an other, I think? Yeah, he's another, but he just looks like a dude. He comes out of the store and stops them.
Yeah, and I really like the choice to bring this faceless woman back, because when she was in that whole pizza delivery prank, in what way?
Gone wrong, yeah.
Well, I mean, no, now that we've met them, it was just a prank from their perspective, I reckon.
Yeah.
But what was that, Arc 2?
Yeah, that was Arc
1? 2. Yeah, so, back then, she was this, big, bad other. That was really scary when it happened, and there was a point made that for some reason it stuck with me that all the others in the scene were sort of avoiding her, she's super scary. And I think she's really just been used in this scene largely to bring up this point that it's okay, she was right at the top of the tier list before, but the situation in Jacob's Bell is really bad now, and she's I think he says she probably doesn't even make the top 25.
Yeah, she's small potatoes.
So it really sets that how much the stakes have increased since the Jacob's Bell we knew of yore.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think that's a good reason to bring her back, because she is also one of the first others that we really saw, right? Mm-hmm. And so having, maybe we're jumping ahead a bit here, but having Blake kind of become part of her group of friends, basic or, an acquaintance, really solidifies the idea that, yeah, he's a Jacob's Bell other now, like he's part of the gang.
Oh, I mean, yeah, for sure. That was like such a huge, traumatic, horrific thing when it happened in Arc 2. It was like,
Yeah.
this world is horrible, and now,
Now
Blake's just having
palling
chats with
around
her.
with them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. That was one of the first times we were like, oh shit, others are actually kind of horrible. And these are the exact people that caused that reaction, but now Blake's just like
What's up,
hanging out.
guys?
Yeah. So the other interesting thing here to me that's a cool little vibe is the others are also participating in this kind of Cold War, right? They definitely seem to think that they just want to let things play out for now and lay low, and then they can capitalize on the stuff when it does kick off.
Yeah, well, I mean, my understanding of it is, the locals, even the sort of the ones who are bigger, like this faceless woman, can't afford to get caught in the middle of the shitstorm that's coming. So you sort of, they're all trying to keep to the edges, but as close as they can, so that they're in the best position when the shit does hit the fan to exploit it. But you don't want to quite be caught in the crossfire. So they're all just standing as close as they can without actually putting their toes in the water, or at least that's what they're trying to do. This faceless lady doesn't always
she doesn't seem to play by the rules. Yeah. So Blake watches the faceless woman and the pizza man kind of have this conversation, a one-sided conversation, because the pizza man is the only one who can talk. And it seems pretty stilted before Blake realizes that the man is actually trying to talk to him as well.
It's a fun little reveal, because I didn't really see it coming at all. But when you go back and read the conversation, a lot of his earlier questions that she doesn't really answer were clearly aimed at Blake as well.
Yeah.
It's great. And I mean, we've already talked about this, but I instantly fell in love with these two and their wacky dynamic / murder spree. It's a very fun twist on a lot of stuff. I had a lot of fun with this conversation.
Yeah.
Like, just the ridiculousness of this situation carries you through the entire conversation.
The thing that I liked about this as well is this man is so not otherish. Like, for this whole conversation, Blake doesn't point out anything weird about him, right? Except for towards the end, he seems kind of, I don't know, numb, maybe a little bit of a psychopath, but no like physical abnormalities or anything, which I think is an interesting choice to have him in this scene, right? Because it kind of feels like, I guess this is the opposite of what we were saying before, but it kind of feels like smoothing the on-ramp for Blake becoming another, for this other guy who's like, yeah, I'm just a dude, like whatever.
Well, for me, sort of what I noticed is, like, I completely agreed. I got the sense that he was very numb and dulled. Like, he comes across as very worn down and tired. Like, this guy reminded me of the Drains. And I was thinking about, so we have these two. We have Pizza Guy and the Faceless Woman. Yeah. And they kind of represent these two extremes that Blake is currently trying to balance. Like, he does seem to be kind of alternating between just this inhuman other with no emotions and being like a rage monster. And so I don't really think it's an accident that now he's having a conversation with either side of that spectrum. And especially, like, I really love that there's a synergy between these two, like these two really get along. And, maybe I'm reaching now, but there's that sort of symbology of how you got to like foster the relationship between those two extremes. Like, that's how you meet in the middle, is you sort of accept the benefits of each and work your way into the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like these two as a pair. I like the idea that they're kind of representative of balancing each other out. I don't know. It's something that I didn't really think of, but I think it makes sense.
I mean, yeah, I just feel like each of them represents the directions he's going, but like also they represent how the middle ground between those two is to sort of work to the strength of each. Like this guy sort of controls the angry side, but he also knows when to let her go. I mean, there's also just their dynamic. Like, I love how easily they can communicate despite one of them not being able to speak. Like, I think that also kind of contrasts Blake and Rose, who both can speak but neither can listen.
I like that.
I mean, again, I think that just reinforces that whole idea about sort of working with different parts of yourself.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. The other thing I like about this is it really gives us this vibe that we kind of have had hinted at, but we haven't really seen to this extent, that the others around Jacob's Bell, the ones that aren't like, fairy or goblin that kind of have their own class structures also seem to have some kind of society developed, that they seem to, a very hierarchical society, but a society nonetheless that seems to have its own kind of rules, which I like.
Yeah, there's this like little underbelly or like other social networking system going on there. This like ignored class in the town that's like, if they don't step out of bounds, they're just kind of forgotten about and ignored.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, these two are kind of so friendly. I kind of root for them now, which is like such a weird thing to say because
Are you
I know
shipping them?
They're still murder monsters. No, I don't really ship them. I just
Pizza Woman. That's their ship name.
Okay. I mean, I don't really ship them together. I just like that. I just want more of them in the story. I kind of hope that Blake's almost pseudo friendship with them comes back to reward him in some way in the future.
I mean, we've seen, I think it was a kind of theme throughout the Drains that Blake leaning into his otherness, and it's continued a bit as well outside of the Drains, that Blake leaning into his otherness would bring him boons. So I like the idea of whatever abstract force it is pushing him to kind of form a society with the others as well.
Yeah, I just like the idea of like, so, if he's in danger sometime and then these two are just going to show up and they're going to be like, don't worry, bro, we got you.
Yeah, we got you
cool.
back. Yeah.
It's all cool, mate.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, so Blake kind of speaks to them more and they start getting to know each other, and the pizza guy basically starts giving Blake a bit of a crash course on how to be an other.
Yeah, and of course sprinkled into this are the little reminders that this dude's just like a serial killer, basically. I don't know if that's a fair label for another, but he kills people on the regular, and that's something I have to keep reminding myself as I was just sort of falling in love with these two and their weird dynamic. That they're monsters, like literally.
Yes, they are.
And obviously we get our sort of first confirmation in this section that the Drains will pull Blake back in. Like he's still very much connected to the Drains, and they will pull him back in if he steps out of line too much.
Yeah, if he doesn't kind of do what he's supposed to, I got the vibe.
Yes, and like we sort of already suspected that after the end of Arc 9, but this is just sort of really reinforcing that idea that the Drains are always going to be over his shoulder. And, as like, I feel like the message he sort of gets from these two here is like, you've got to do bad shit to leave your impression on the world.
Yeah.
And Blake is going to have to come to terms with the fact that he either does that or ends up back in the Drains, right? Or finds a different way of leaving an imprint.
Yeah, I mean, forming strong connections with people presumably would be a way to do that as well. But this is the first point at which I kind of get the vibe that Blake isn't as freaked out by some of the implications of what he has to do as he should be, right? Like, he doesn't seem to react too strongly to the idea of having to, I don't know, kill people to leave an imprint. He's like, oh, I wonder how many imprints this guy's left. But he doesn't ever think like, oh no, am I going to have to do that?
Yeah, he almost doesn't really seem to process it yet. Like, I'm willing to not call him out too much for just sort of shoving it aside. But also, I mean, it does say something that it doesn't really occur to him that much to think about it.
Yeah.
He calls him out on it a little bit, but not much.
Something interesting that happens, I'll read this quote out, where Blake is... They're asking Blake if he's killed before, and he says, Laird, self-defense in large part. Ah, that was you. That was me, I said. This is a fun little beat of Blake kind of seemingly earning his stripes in their mind. The Faceless Woman seems to be like, oh, cool. All right. You're cool. You're not just a narc.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that thing in like a teen movie where the kid shows up with beer or something to be accepted by the peers.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it definitely seems to win her over, at least. And I guess this other guy, he's hard to read because he's so, like, drained.
Yeah.
That's probably a poor choice of words.
No, it's fair.
You know what I mean. Sort of speaking of like lead and what that sort of means to these people, I wanted to put out this quote where the pizza man, the pizza revenant, explains the current situation as they see it, because I think it's really cool to sort of get this outsider perspective on where all of our candidates are sitting. So he sort of says, Sandra wants to preserve tradition, which, makes sense. She does sort of represent the old guard in a lot of ways. He also says, Johannes wants a new world where others exist in ghettos eating phantom sustenance.
Yep,
which
sounds like a pretty ideal world, to be
kind
honest.
of lines up. And he is sort of the new up-and-comer. with big plans to change things. So, like, yeah, we know about that. He then goes on to say the Bahams seem to think they can make everything better if they're in charge, which just seems to think that they reckon the Bahams are just sort of think they're entitled to it, which
and
winds up
they
with
don't really have a strong plan of what they'd actually do.
No, they just believe that they should be in charge, which winds up with their smugness pretty well, I think.
Yep.
And then, of course, he rounds it out by saying, I don't know what the Thorburns want, which is good because it's not just us then. Like,
nobody knows what they want.
Like, I don't know what any Rose Thorburns are up to at this point.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. There's multiple generations of not knowing what the fuck the Thorburns are up to.
Exactly.
So they kind of do a bit of a round of what's going on with everybody, and then the conversation starts to wind down, and Pizza Guy offers Blake that he can come hunting with them if he wants, hunting for weakened practitioners to eat or whatever. The Pizza Guy also identifies Mags as the person Blake's looking for and kind of calls out to her to summon her.
Yeah, and so before they figure out that, like, Mags is who he's after, they're all walking together to the school, and it actually took me a while to click that these two are heading in the direction of the school.
Yeah.
It's never explicitly said that was where they were going, but Jacob's Bell isn't that big. I have a feeling that might be where they're going, and I love how it's never explicitly stated. It's just one of those things where as you get towards the end of the section, you're like, wait, hold on, what? Where are they going?
Just heading to school. I'm sure it's innocent. I want to hit this beat again. Blake doesn't ever react poorly to the idea of hunting with them. He's kind of like, oh, interesting. Yeah, maybe. And he's kind of dismissal to not... He doesn't want to be too dismissive to not kind of offend him, but in his head also he isn't thinking, no, I'm not going to do that. Like... Or even, I might have to do that. Oh no. He's just kind of like ignoring it. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think, like, he doesn't seem even ambivalent or positive about it. He's very much sort of that would be bad. But it is definitely a sort of dulled reaction to what we would have expected from, Mr. All Human Life is Sacred Blake of the first 7 arcs. Like, it does just sort of feel like he's like, that's just not really for me. Rather than like, no, that is wrong and I must fight you now, which I kind of feel is like what he would have done before.
Well, he also thinks around this point, he thinks about, I'm sure that this situation could apply to Tiffany, Alexis, and Tyler, somebody hunting them down. And he kind of has a moment where he explicitly kind of thinks to himself that he maybe wants to kill Rose. So there's a few things going on here that, I don't know, feel like they're continuations of the thread of Blake just becoming a bit too okay with how much of an other he is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's also not really a point. Like, as you said, he calls out that it could be, Alexis, Ty, or Tiff, and, there's and it could be, like, a child Duchamp or Baham, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I tend to agree that he's... his resistance to the idea is from a much less broad place than it was before.
Yeah, definitely. Much more kind of like it feels like he's doing that because that's what he thinks he should do, or like that's his default, not because he actually has an aversion to hunting people,
Well, and he only cares about if it happens to his friends, not to just innocents.
Yeah. Anyway, so Mags shows up and still recognizes Blake, and kind of gives him the 411 on what he missed while he was down in the drains.
Yeah, and like you just totally skipped over the fact that she's got 2 goblin servants who I assume are Buttsack along with Cumnugget, and they're in snowsuits, which is just fucking adorable and hilarious. like picturing these goblins in little puffy snowsuits just made my day. This might be my favorite image in the whole story so far. These 2 reluctant servant goblins in fucking snowsuits.
Why are they in snowsuits, do you think? Just to make them disguised as children?
And hopefully to fuck with them. Like,
yeah, I hope so. So the interesting thing about this little start of this conversation is it kind of crashes back together Arc 8 and 9 and ties all the plot threads that were kind of lingering from Arc 8 back to the kind of contemporary plot that we're exploring from Arc 9 and now Arc 10. It's a nice kind of efficient way of, bringing everything back into the main story, which I like.
True, although Mags hasn't yet told Blake most of the truth about what... It was actually only a little bit into this that I suddenly remembered he doesn't know it wasn't Mags with him
Yeah.
in Toronto yet.
Yeah.
That like I'd gotten a bit confused about what he did and didn't know, and it was a little bit of the conversation. I was like, oh wait, fuck, like he has no idea.
She kind of hand waves it away, like, oh, don't worry about it. And then later on, Blake says, oh, you were there, you saw, and Mags is like, oh, I wasn't there. And it's kind of like, huh? What? But yeah, anyway.
But like, yeah, this is sort of the first proper look we get at Mags since her interlude arc. And I mean, you know, she's already kind of quite worn down and tired. But what really got to me is, I think the big thing I sort of took away from Mags in this section is she's really a cog in the machine. She's part of the system now. And, you know, I talked a lot in Arcade about these smart versus right choices and how she was the wild card and all that. And I thought what we were getting at the end of Arc 8 was a bit of a victory, but it was kind of her own way of entering the machine. And it already feels a bit soured to me at this point, because I'm already like, she's become this sort of powerless part of the machine. And I'm just like, oh, like, this isn't good. Like, I guess it is, you know, as she said, she was the worst person to be the wild card given the prophecies around her. But it's a bit of a bummer that now she's just this part of the system.
Yeah, but, you know, being the part of the system probably is the safest thing. I mean, she kind of calls it out as like she wants to be part of the system, right?
But that's exactly why these systems perpetuate.
That's true. That's true. So once they've got the kind of formalities out of the way, Blake starts asking for favors, and Mags feels shit. Because she wants to help, but she's the ambassador, so she can't really play any of the sides.
Yeah, and I mean, this is what I was just saying. Like, this just sucks, especially because like Blake isn't really Team Thorburn anymore, right? Like, he's more of a neutral party. I would have said. I mean, he has the name and the origins of Thorburn.
He's not aligned to Rose, I agree, but he definitely is aligned to Alexis, Tiff, Ty, and Evan.
Yeah.
Which means that he kind of has to be a Thorburn.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's fair. I do just, like, as I was sort of talking about how Mags has been a bit broken down by the system already, there is this bit where she says that when all of this is over, I'll get back what I lost, she said. I'm going to blood and fire and darkness that fairy bastard. And so, like, I'm all about that. I hope we get to see some of that, because he has it coming, and I can't wait just to see her go fucking nuts. It'll be great.
Yeah, that would be fun. A big moment in this conversation is Maggie calls Blake a friend. It's a very genuine, wholesome moment, because, you know, this is Blake's only real friend. Evan counts probably, and Tiffany mostly counts, but, you know, this is a big moment for Blake. Like, it's a friendship that he's wholly managed to win, and still exists.
And keep is the important thing. I mean, and I feel like this is a big deal for both of them, really. You know, Mags not really being a big friend person has been a big thing, and like a lot of Arc 8 was built around her friendship with Blake, particularly the first half. So I think her sort of being able to have that conversation and have him like go along with it probably meant a lot to her as well. Yeah,
definitely. Another beat that gets confirmed here is that Rose is almost certainly being affected by Conquest. So Blake was right. I still feel like he was, I don't know, wrong in a lot of the ways he went about it, but I guess he was right.
I mean, yeah, I stand by what we sort of said last chapter, which is like, even if she is being tainted by Conquest, which I think, well, you know, now we know she is, I still don't think what she did last chapter was necessarily that unreasonable, given the situation she's in. I do think the Conquest hate led to her getting in that situation. I don't think she would be a part of this competition without some of that. So yeah, you know, she's in that situation she was in because of it. But I think once she was already there, I don't think that she did anything too stupid. Also, she goes, or when Mags is explaining this, she goes to call Rose something, and Blake just sort of cuts her off by saying "girl." So, you know, my tinfoil hat was rustling as I read that bit.
Yeah. So I'll read out the quote. She says, "Where the essence of the bound incarnation leaks out, it seeps into the hair, and through the hair it touches on the connection to taint the..." And then Blake jumps in, "girl." Who knows what she was going to say?
Well, not us, and I'm mad about it.
Yeah. Also, Blake brings up to Mags, oh, hey, I've got this friend from the drains and I want to summon them. Their name's Green Eyes. But the witch is not mentioned, which you kind of touched on that during Arc 9 of like Blake doing something to I don't know, nourish her from if he gets back. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because my first thought was that he was going to go say the witch as well because she was a much bigger part of his stay in the drains overall. Like future visions aside, but I guess on the other hand, I just sort of think the witch sort of made that choice.
She did choose to stay, yeah. Although I would think that Blake will try and like send a message to her to be like, "Hey, I got out. Here's how you can do it if you want."
We'll see. I mean, I think she was the one who told him how to do it. She got there and decided she didn't want to anymore. I think she pretty much knew how. She chose not to. And I mean, seeing Blake and the faceless woman and the sort of hold the drain still has on you after you get out, not the craziest idea. Like the drains doesn't leave you. Even if you get out of the drains, it's still a big part of your life from the looks of it.
Yeah. So Maggie's kind of feeling guilty about not being able to help Blake, and a lot of this is seeming to manifest. Mags makes some snide comments about like, oh, did you have to make this request now, dick move? And we find out because it's obviously because she's on her way to do her daily errand, visiting Molly, and she invites Blake.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a very like touching and emotional moment. Like when Blake sees Molly's ghost, his heart does some fluttery thing that's just like, normal sort of heart-wrenching behavior that he's for some reason otherizing himself about.
That's his whole thing at the moment, Elliot.
I do. Like, there's a couple of points in this chapter where Blake sort of unnecessarily otherizes his like normal human reactions to things. It's pretty good. And then he also thanks Mags for what she's been doing to keep the Molly ghost alive, and like there's no way in hell that didn't mean an absolute shit ton to Mags.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, Blake is able to validate her feeling of kind of like feeling betrayed here, right?
Yeah.
So let's read this out because this is a great cliffhanger. I just want to read it out. Blake says, "I don't know if I count, so maybe I'll just say 1.5 down, 5 more to go. Hi, Molly." "Hi," Molly said. Maggie's expression suggested she was as surprised as I was.
That wasn't quite the tone I read
Molly's
the hi
back.
in, but
Hey.
I saw more of just like a hi.
No, I like mine better.
Either way, I mean, it's a big like what the fuck moment.
I love it. And Mags is surprised too.
Yeah, it's so great because like the Molly ghost didn't talk, and I mean, it could be this whole thing about something's happened recently that's activated her or whatever. Because we still don't quite understand where she fits into the whole Blake Rose plan. I'm guessing we'll get a bit more info on that now that she's here. But I kind of want it to be this funny idea that she could speak the whole time. She just didn't want to speak to Mags.
Maybe. That would be pretty heartbreaking for Mags.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be it, but it would be kind of funny.
Yeah. But presumably we will hear more from her next chapter.
Yes.
Because that's the end of Mala Fide 10.2. But before we go, we wanted to do a bit of a dive into a deep dive into something that we've been kind of thinking about looking at a bit more, which is references to Blake's tattoos. It happens often in Pact that something gets completely recontextualized, so why not read the whole story again and find all references to that thing?
Or, just Control F every chapter for the word tattoo, which is what I did.
Okay. Anyway, so we've gone back through and pulled out references to the tattoos to kind of track what was going on with them over the course of the story up until the point where we found out they were actually spirits.
Yeah. And so a lot of the Arc 1 references are sort of before like Blake is awakened, so it's just people noticing and commenting on them.
Yeah. And we get a kind of baseline of what they look like, which is helpful to compare against later on when they're more infested. But the first time we really notice some strange stuff going on with them is after Blake awakens. He sees his tattoos moving slightly. So do we think this is the spirits kind of automatically getting in there? Like, is this representative of the fact that basically awakening brings you closer to being an other, and now he's unprotected, he just kind of spirits get in there?
Well, I mean, he was presumably an other before he even awoke.
Sure.
If he was a vestige. I more see it as like they were getting rearranged and sort of resettling. Like it would have been a big. I'm assuming awakening on a spiritual level is like this big fundamental shift, and they probably had to readjust themselves to I don't know, the new climate.
Maybe the spirits were shoring up his damage the whole time, but awakening just allowed him to see them doing that.
That's true. They may have only started being stealth after he awoke, and they didn't quite realize at first.
Yeah. So Arc 2, the word tattoo appears 0 times, so let's just keep moving. Arc 3 is when they start summoning a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so right at the start of Arc 3, we've jumped ahead a few days, or maybe a day, and they've spent basically the whole day summoning things and expending a lot of power. And Blake kind of notices that the tattoos look weird. Something interesting is Rose kind of points out, hey, maybe this is possession almost straight away.
Yeah.
So
I kind of wrote it off. I kind of wrote it off ages ago, but nope, she was bang on. We should have listened to Rose.
Yeah.
So obviously the big thing here is that the birds and the background colors are much more vivid this time, as he's sort of starting to drain himself a bit. So yes. I'm very much I'm working off the assumption at the moment that the birds becoming brighter is sort of the spirits getting a stronger foothold in him.
Yeah, I think so. Blake,
the background colors are still something I'm actually like. The more we went through and did this, the background colors are still a bit of a mystery to me. I'm not sure exactly what they symbolize. So I'm sort of making note of every time they're mentioned specifically, and like this is one where the background was also more vivid as he got drained.
Yeah. Something I want to touch on that I think is interesting, not really a specific point from any one chapter, but just throughout, you know, the all of this story, Blake sees his tattoos as a kind of embodiment of the idea that his body is his and the kind of one thing he can depend on. And I think that's especially interesting because in Arc 3, this is the arc where he does glamour to change into a little kid and then he changes back. And throughout that, he kind of uses his tattoos as an anchor, something that he knows is like emblematic of him, and he kind of changes back to that version of himself. But obviously, as these tattoos are getting more and more possessed, that idea of his self is kind of not super accurate because it's not just himself, it's his tattoo spirits. So I kind of see it interesting that Blake kind of has this ideal of himself that is represented by his tattoos, but that is kind of being eroded throughout the entire story.
Yeah, well, it's a nice little inversion. He sees them as the definition of himself, whereas it turns out they're kind of exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm sort of working off the assumption that he was programmed a little bit to value his tattoos because maybe Rose knew a bit more about them. Maybe that's why she picked it so early. And she was able to use them as a gauge of how he's going. Like, assuming she was in on this the whole time, which is sort of the assumption I'm working off of.
Yep.
Then like that would sort of make sense to have an external indicator that she can use.
Yeah, true. That's interesting. I didn't think of that.
So then we head into Arc 4, and this is Blake meets Alexis again, and she sort of notices that the colors are a bit more vibrant than they should be, which again is just because he's pretty worn out even as he just gets to Toronto.
Yeah, and Tiffany also kind of notes his tattoos in chapter 6, chapter 4.6. But it's interesting because the tattoos are doing really badly. This is right after Blake has first met Pose and his radiation is off the charts. It's interesting because he kind of notices the birds. Or there's this quote where he says, I was getting more of a sense of what was going on with my tattoos, though. They're a barometer of sorts, a kind of representation of what was affecting me on a mystical level. And he kind of explains it a bit more. It's interesting to me. He kind of obviously notes Pose's radiation affecting the tattoos and kind of being an indicator that something bad is going on. But when he is more drained, his tattoos are more vibrant. And he kind of seems to see this as a bit of a like, oh, you know, I'm drained, but I'm okay. My tattoos are doing all right kind of thing. Whereas really it's the opposite.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, now we understand that. But yeah, I like these details of after he's been posed, the birds become like dirtier. They look more feral. And I mean, obviously that adds up with what we know about Pose and his radiation.
Does that mean that the spirits, it's the same spirits, but they're a bit more feral? Or is it like meaner spirits are now in his tattoos.
I was working off the assumption it was the spirits that were already in him. They just
Okay.
got posed a bit.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And from this point on, the tattoos only get worse, right?
Yeah, I mean, they really go through some shit. Well, there's an interesting bit in 4.9 as well where, and this is where the meaning of the background really started to stand out to me, because the birds sort of get a lot more messed up.
Yeah.
But also the background becomes this like darker cloud, and he compares it to a bruise he has on his shoulder. So yeah, I'm interested to see exactly what that means because I haven't pieced it together yet. And then yes, in 4.12 there's another reference to the fact that he's getting paler, but even his tattoos aren't really getting more vibrant now, so I assume he's even wearing the spirits out.
He says after this, things were starting to make sense, which I think is a complete lie, Blake. No, so this is when he's in the hyena's domain, and so maybe there's some... Obviously, we know the hyena kind of eats or scares off spirits and others.
Yeah, maybe they were hiding.
Yeah, that's kind of my read on that, is the spirits that were in his tattoos or in him either were scared off or were just kind of laying low.
Yeah. So the next interesting tattoo reference is, I think, in Arc 5.3, which is after Blake has cut himself open in the prison, in his like borderline suicidal getaway attempt.
Yeah.
And basically the birds are all like beheaded and just kind of generally fucked up. There's feathers entering the real world. So basically working off the assumption here that he fucked himself up so much, even the spirits that were taking refuge in him got caught up in the devastation.
Yeah.
Which
is insane.
Yeah, and presumably did open him up to more serious things taking hold.
Yeah. And yeah, this is a thing that kind of comes up towards the end of Arc 5, right? Is Fel saying to him, like, hey, you might actually be possessed. And Blake's like, I'm not possessed. Fel was right the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just didn't change that much, I guess. He wasn't more possessed.
Yeah.
But yeah, yes. So yeah, the rest of Arc 5 and 6, there's some casual mentions, I think, and nothing worth sort of bringing up. But then as we head into Arc 7, in 7.3, after he gets slashed by Isadora and he's in like the dream state with Evan and eventually Miss Lewis, he notes that his tattoos, the branches and birds had doubled in number, which there was, after he got mauled by Isadora, I guess there was more rooms open up in Hotel de Blake.
Yeah, I mean, he's having a vision of his ideal future, right? Maybe the implication there is like he's just gonna in the future he's just gonna keep breaking down and more spirits are gonna get inside him. Maybe whatever vision he's having kind of knows that. I don't know.
Maybe I was just working off the assumption that's just where they were at in the real world as well.
Oh yeah, fair enough. He's obviously pretty fucked up at the moment, right?
Yeah, but that's actually pretty much the only mention of the tattoos in all of Arc 7. Arc 8 didn't really have any either. Maggie didn't really think about Blake's tattoos that much. And then, of course, Arc 9 is sort of where it all starts to come together.
Yeah.
In 9.1, Blake mentions that his tattoos seem to have a mind of their own and he doesn't understand them, which was a nice little bit of foreshadowing right before we kind of finally get it put together.
Yeah.
In 9.4, when Blake realizes that he's a vestige, he sort of comes back to in the drains, and he doesn't have tattoos when he first respawns, and then they kind of respread. They kind of respread over his body, which is a very nice visual, especially now that we know what they mean.
Yeah.
And of course, in 9.5, he actually takes a look at them now that he knows he's another. And there's basically a whole shit ton more birds, and they're all kind of like staying in the back, kind of peering out and watching him, which I assume is because they're under assault in the drains as well. Like, we know the drains isn't really the spirit's favorite place to be either.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, I wonder if this is something that affects all boogeymen, right? Like, if they have a thing that... Because obviously the spirits possessing Blake, I kind of feel like they're linked to him becoming more and more of an other, and his kind of other sensibilities growing. So I wonder if... basically all these others that we've met have kind of been a product of spirits inhabiting them and kind of turning them more and more into whatever they're becoming.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the story of Pact has made explicit reference to things like, the way you maintain your domain affects which spirits come in, which sort of
Yeah.
affects you and the domain based on the energy. And I've sort of been assuming for quite a while that the same is true just of yourself. Like
Mm.
the things you do and the spirits you're constantly interacting with affects kind of what is in you. Because I think even normal practitioners to some degree have like spirits of their self, and I think what you're doing would manipulate those to some extent. And yeah, I think boogeymen are the extreme of that, where presumably someone like Midge is pretty much consumed with angry spirits.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Because we kind
Yeah.
of know that Midge exists in the form she's in because it was kind of reaffirmed over time.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we kind of have the idea of spirits inhabiting people a bit more aggressively, it kind of makes sense to me that the spirits that inhabit Midge kind of just become a breeding echo chamber of anger, and that's what makes her what she is. Like they're the
Yeah.
conduit for for the ideas of what she is to kind of settle.
And especially for boogeymen, like we've sort of known that the spirits are what gives them their unique powers and stuff. And I mean, we've even had that sort of explicitly confirmed for Evan as well. Like I think we all suspected this for a while, but Evan isn't just a soul; he's a soul with like escape and wind spirits mixed in.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what's starting to be explicitly stated. And like presumably Blake is the same. I mean, we don't know what spirits are in him, but the fact that there's still birds on his tattoos makes me think he probably has similar spirits within him, and maybe that's why he and Evan just sort of felt an immediate affinity for each other.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, now the spirits are out and about, and they're becoming, the tattoos are becoming more and more 3D. The birds have been able to start turning their heads.
Yeah, 9.6 and both the chapters in Arc 10. Basically, all the references to the tattoos are just they're everywhere and they're worse, and Blake's in real trouble.
Yep. So I guess we'll see where it goes from here.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait. Both with the tattoos
He's going
and
to turn
everything else.
into a bird? I don't know. Or a flock of birds. Maybe he can be like a vampire and turn into a flock of bats, but instead it's birds.
That would be pretty cool. Like, I don't know. I'd sacrifice some shit in the drains for that.
I'd get tattoos for that. That's the end of our discussion of Mala Fide 10.2, though. If you want to leave us your thoughts on what you think Blake's tattoos are going to do next, the best place to do that is in our tattoo discussion threads, which are at the linked down in the episode description.
Yes, but of course we also accept tattoo-related tweets and anything else, really, over on Twitter.
No,
at
just
Media MD
tattoo
Podcast.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay, only tattoo-related tweets, or we won't reply.
Yeah, please. At Media MD Podcast is our Twitter. If you want to send tattoo-related media to the other podcasts on the Duff Media Network, the best place to do that is duffmedia.com, where you can see all kinds of great shows, like We've Got Ward.
I'm really enjoying engaging with Do the Right Thing at the moment. But unfortunately, its spot as the newest member of the Doof Network is already about to disappear. Because
Yeah, I mean, technically.
yeah, I guess it's arguable, but 24 hours after this episode is published, Vow to View will be launching their new sort of, I don't know, what's the word, brand, as they transition over to What You Say.
Yes, Vow to View has for a long time been one of my favourite Doof shows, despite the fact that its actual format is probably the part of it I like the least. Like the on-paper part of it where they prescribe each other movies. I don't know. I've got enough prescription podcasts in my life. I just like them hanging out and talking about shit. And so I'm really excited for What You Say. I think it's going to be great.
Oh, yes. And I think the OC is a good fit for, mixing in with The Bachelor and the Rosies and Thornies talk.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wait, Elliot, do you hear that?
What you say? It's the newest Doof show, starring Scott and Ellie's. What you say? Could it be Doof's best? Of course it could. What you say? Each week they watch the OC and talk about life. What you say? Subscribe to hear what they say.
Wow, sounds like a great show. Now, if you want these shows, all of the shows on the Duff Media Network only exist because of the support of our lovely patrons. If you'd like to be a lovely patron or a regular patron, you can head over to patreon.com/duffmedia.
Yes, and of course, as we've already mentioned, the only thing keeping Wildbow from being possessed by spirits is his patron donations. So head on over to patreon.com/Wildbow and prevent him from being taken over, because if he gets sent to the drains, he can't write. Yeah. That's just science.
And he'll always be at risk of being recaptured. If he gets into the drains, the only way his web shields will go out are on weird drain radio stations.
I mean, I'd try and find a way.
Try and tune in. Anyway, our next episode will be 10.3. That's coming out on Wednesday the 21st. So we will see you then.
See ya.